In 1875, a man named Robert Christison, actually Sir Robert Christison, he was elected to be the president of the British Medical Association at the age of 78 years old. He had been practicing medicine for more than 50 years when he was elected to be president of this association. What he had been doing during that time, or at least some of that time, is he'd been studying the bodily effects of various poisons like arsenic and cyanide. Now, this is obviously a different time in history, obviously 1875, and one of the interesting things about this is you didn't just send out emails or tell people that you would give them money if they would come in and they would be volunteers for testing, So he decided to use these various poisons that he was working on himself in small doses, which there's like a "here's your sign" comment right here somewhere, okay? But he would use these various poisons on himself until they started to take effect, and then he would just regurgitate these poisons as best he could. One of these toxins was a green leaf, which would, within just a few moments, numb his tongue, but it would give him long-lasting energy. And at 78 years old, he felt as though he was 25 again. In fact, he was so energetic after ingesting this poison one day, after chewing on this green leaf, that he went ahead and took a 9-hour stroll that spanned more than 9 miles. He came home with plenty of energy. He wasn't hungry. He wasn't thirsty. He woke up the next day with great energy, and he was ready to do more work. Christensen had been chewing on the coca leaf, if you haven't figured that out by now, which we've learned to manipulate into cocaine. At the very same time, or right around the very same time, in Vienna, a neurologist named Sigmund Freud was doing some of his own research and documenting what he could do with the coca leaf and all sorts of manipulations himself. Freud found, interestingly enough, that cocaine, or at least the manipulation of the coca leaf into various forms, it actually aided him in fighting off depression. And as a man who battled various digestion struggles, it actually helped him with his stomach issues as well. He famously writes in this letter to his fiancée that he believed that he would win all sorts of awards because of the research that he was doing with the coca leaf, and that cocaine would eventually be as prevalent and as trusted as morphine. In his own notes, he states that he realized he needed just a little bit more of it each day in order to ward off the fatigue and to make sure his stomach felt a little bit better. He also figured out that cocaine, in the way that he was at least using it, could actually eliminate, if it was phased out well, all of how morphine was used. He practiced this with some success, and people with him, some who actually took his medical advice, actually found freedom from their morphine addictions. And as I mentioned morphine, we should also remember that years previous to that, morphine was championed by countless doctors because it aided in helping soldiers fight off, deal with, and work past the pain of various battle wounds. Now, I want you to keep these stories in the back of your head for just a moment. Last week, we started a new sermon series kind of talking through technology and talking about all of the things that come along with technology. And one of the biggest things we wrestled with last week, or at least talked about, and Ren brought this up with the conversation of the app Moment, is what does it mean to be present? Truly to be present. We have 1 million distractions at our disposal in order to not be present. And yet, one of the primary foundational pieces of Christianity is to be present. Going back to the beginning of creation, God is present with his creation. We see the beauty of what it looks like that God walks in the cool of the eve with Adam. And then here is the Christ coming in the form of Jesus to be present to people at a specific time, at a specific place, and for specific purposes. There is something divine about the way we were created to just be present with one another. We've got all sorts of countless data that shows us that we live in a world of people with this internal divine hole that where we just need belonging, we need community. And I want to talk through a few of the things this morning. I want us to consider how some of the greatest inventions of our time and in previous times, much like technology and social media, how those things are forming us a little bit. We've got countless scientific breakthroughs and technological advancements in history, and some of them were just not as helpful as we originally thought they were. All you have to do is look at the perspectives and the stories of Christensen and Freud to know that today, I don't know anybody who's championing the role of cocaine in your life. And yet, that doesn't necessarily mean that the coca leaf is the worst thing in the world. In fact, many of you know this, I actually grew up in Ecuador. There's probably an Andes mountain farmer right now chewing on a coca leaf because it works for him basically like a cup of coffee did for you this morning. But I also want us to look at, well, a story from Scripture this morning that is oftentimes one, it's either just not preached. Many of us may not even know this story. We may know 3 words of the story, and that is, it is the story of the Tower of Babel. Possibly, maybe a better translation is the Tower of Babylon. This is from Genesis chapter 11. I want to read for you these first 9 verses here. The whole earth had the same language and vocabulary. As people migrated from the east, they found a valley in the land of Shinar and settled there. They said to each other, "Come, let us make oven-fired bricks." They used brick for stone and asphalt for mortar. And they said, "Come, let us build ourselves a city and a tower with its top in the sky." That word sky literally means heavens. "Let us make a name for ourselves. Otherwise, we will be scattered throughout the earth." Then the Lord came down to look over the city and the tower that humans were building. The Lord said, "If they have begun to do this as one people, all having the same language, then nothing they plan to do will be impossible for them. Come, let's go down there and confuse their language so that they will not understand one another's speech." So from there, the Lord scattered them throughout the earth, and they stopped building the city. Therefore it is called Babylon, or Babel. For there the Lord confused the language of the whole earth, and from there the Lord scattered them throughout the earth. It's interesting the way this story kind of comes up in Scripture, because in a lot of ways, if you read the book of Genesis, it kind of seems just out of place. But I want you to know, and I want you to see, that in Genesis chapter 11, we see one of the newest inventions. It was a technological and it was an industrial breakthrough, this oven-fired brick that would bring about stability for homes and businesses in ways that no one had ever seen before. I mean, can you imagine just for a moment when you're talking about Genesis chapter 11 and how the world was even being formed at the time and how people were interacting, what it would have looked like for people to have this type of an invention at their disposal? It would have changed everything. And yet, what we see in Genesis chapter 11 is an immediate perversion of what should have been a beautiful moment and breakthrough in technology and in industry. What is the first thing they want to do? They want to build a tower to the heavens so that they can be on the same level as God. Come, let us build a tower to the heavens, or we will be scattered. They already know what the consequences are when it comes to Genesis chapter 11. If they don't get to God's level, they know discipline is coming. Something is going to happen. And it looks a whole lot like Genesis chapter 3. When you see the serpent coming and saying, hey, you want to be like God? You want to be on the same level as God? You want the same control as God? You want to make a name for yourself? And here are Adam and Eve choosing to do just that. I'm blown away. I'm blown away sometimes with how easily it is we pervert good things into something that's bad. And crazy enough, even in this text, you see the work of God's collective self. Did you hear it? Let us go down there and confuse their language. God is having his own communal conversation, much like he does in Genesis chapter 1. Let us make humankind in our image. Here is Father, Son, and Spirit at work because they have kingdom ways for the world. And the brick should have been and could have been one of the most beautiful inventions, something to bless all of the world. And instead, it is perverted into selfishness simply because they want to make a name for themselves. And I don't think we should forget the irony of this story. Because if you fast forward just a few hundred years into the future, do you remember what the children of Israel were doing as slaves in Egypt? Making bricks. Isn't that interesting? What could have been, what should have been, a way in which to bless one another and to bless people and to give this great invention to the world becomes the device by which they find slavery. One of the world's greatest inventions. Now, I've heard all of my life that hindsight is 20/20. And the only thing I will say to that is hindsight is only 20 if you are humble enough and smart enough to discern the past. If not, hindsight's not 20/20. You just repeat history, right? We know this. We know that a lot of great inventions have brought us world-changing dynamics. Originally, we thought morphine was that. You started to see how a coca leaf could stimulate the mind and the body and ease stomach issues, and then with a little bit more perversion, with a little bit more manipulation, with a little bit more me-centeredness, becomes a horrific evil. And a smartphone and various social media platforms can truly be a gift, connecting people across the world at a moment's notice. We have learned that social media allows us to express opinions and feelings to dozens, hundreds, and thousands of people. And yet, sitting in the very midst of these inventions are still our hearts, our agendas, and our motivations. And I have to wonder, how smart enough and humble enough we are to see the various inventions and worldviews that are sitting right in the midst of our lives. Are we able to discern them for what they truly are? So they've been around long enough, these smartphones, social media, and all sorts of breakthroughs with technology. They've been around long enough for us to collect a ton of data, to review what goes on with the human heart and even in our brokenness. And in a host of ways, social media platforms like Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram have, if we're being really honest, I don't have to tell you how good these things are, do I? I mean, you get it. One of the best things in the world to me is to look and to see how my nephew and niece, or how my nephews and nieces across the United States are growing up and seeing new things for them. Getting a chance to watch my nephew score a goal that I would never get to see in soccer ever, simply because they live 5 to 6 hours away, is a beautiful moment for us. Getting a chance to catch up with people across the globe, or people that we've loved, or people who have been major pillars in our life throughout the history of our own existence. That is great that we can keep up with them. We know these are good things. And yet, in a lot of ways, because of the way that we use them, because of the way that we use a lot of things in our life, I don't know that we really want to wrestle with some of the perversions that they bring within our world. You're seeing adolescents develop this worldview, and in a lot of ways, it is a true cultural thing that's taking place for them, that if they are not connected to social media and able to text with one another at a moment's notice, they don't belong. Either they're in it or they're on the outside, seemingly, of every one of their community circles. Social media seems like, in so many ways, it's been perverted into, let's make a name for ourselves, just like Genesis chapter 11. We tell the world how wonderful our life is. Look at my cute cat or my vacation that I went on. And we act like this is the reality in which we live. But we also fight with people we don't think see the world like we do. We see people call names. We see people demean entire demographics of people simply because they disagree with our politics. We use social media to make ourselves look good, because we've been formed to see that social media is a place where I can say all sorts of edgy things regardless of how it hurts somebody, because I don't actually have to interact with them. We see people use a whole lot of language they would never use to someone's face. Texting and email have seemingly replaced answering the phone. Did you know that there are, on average, this is one of the statistics that I've seen, that on average, the normal person will respond to 40 plus emails a day. They will read and respond to, or read and purposely not respond to, 40 plus emails a day. But after breaking their concentration on whatever work they are doing, after responding to an email, it takes almost 20 minutes to get back into the flow of actually highest functioning productivity. Which means most people never work at the highest functioning productivity for their jobs, because we are inundated with answering emails. The average text message is seen within 3 minutes, and after being seen within 3 minutes, is responded to in 90 seconds. And we've hit a cultural norm now where if people do not get their response in a text message back within 20 minutes, they assume that there's something wrong with their relationship to the person they just texted. Think about that for a moment. Let me just tell you, that is asinine, all right? That we look at our cultural worldview has devolved to such a degree that if I don't get somebody's response back in a text message within 20 minutes, I literally think either this person is a jerk or they don't like me. That is craziness. But it's more than just statistics when it comes to that way. There is something consciously or subconsciously taking place in the way that we use texting and email, because it forces me not to be vulnerable. Because when I text and email, I get to control the situation. I get to control the flow of the conversation. And we've literally hit a point in our cultural norms now where people do not answer phones purposely because it's too much vulnerable interaction with another person. A phone call. In fact, you are more than 200% more likely to get a response through a text message than you are through a phone call. But that conversation of control is even, we see it even with phone calls. How many of us have heard stories about people who were dumped in a boyfriend-girlfriend relationship through an email or a text message? First of all, that's stupid. We all know that that's inappropriate. We know that that is not the way you end a relationship, and yet I would bet everybody in the room, seemingly, or most of us in the room, either it happened to or we know somebody that it did happen to. Because there's something fearful about actually being with somebody, having a face-to-face conversation. A few years ago, I was doing youth ministry. This is like 10 years ago. And one of the things that I thought was really, really interesting is that there was this like phenomenon where youth ministers were like congratulating themselves because we were seeing statistically that kids were having less sex. And we were super pumped in youth ministry circles that kids were having less sex. Do you know why they were having less sex? They were addicted to gaming. They were addicted to email. They were addicted not really so much to email, but to texting, social media platforms. And we were pumped because we were like, well, if they're going to screw up, at least they're addicted to technology and not getting each other pregnant. And we thought we'd had some cultural breakthrough, seemingly, in youth ministry circles. The crazy thing is, we're starting to see statistically. My children are 8 and 10 years old, and we're seeing brains being formed even at 6, 7, and 8 years old. That empathy is dying in our kids because the only way they know how to relate is through some digital device. Think about that, folks. The ability to empathize with another person is dying in our culture because we have chosen to make technology and text messaging and pick something else a cultural idol. And so when somebody speaks about how they're hurt, let me just put it this way. We've entered a new realm for me when I do marriage counseling. The last several years, I have to tell husbands to turn off the Xbox and just go to bed with their wives. That's our world. I tell husbands and wives, get off Facebook and just see each other when you lay down in bed together. We've hit a time in which we can't be vulnerable, and we don't know how to empathize with one another's day. And because of our addictions to some of these things, we aren't journeying together in life. And something that could be a beautiful thing to bring relationships together has been perverted into a distraction to keep us from having to actually wrestle with one another's identity. So we have some choices. Because to be brutally honest with you, I don't want to have a hindsight as 2020 moment when I'm 60 and 70 years old because I did not help my kids put technology in the right place. See, we have to realize that it's not just that Jesus came to give us a beautiful picture into what it means to be present at a certain time with specific people and at specific places. Do you understand that's your life? You have been given a specific time, specific relationships, and a specific place within this culture and within your circles of influence, a specific one. And the continuation is still there. Are we present in these things? Because here is the truth. For you and I to learn empathy, for us to learn understanding, we have to physically see and experience how our words and actions affect others. That is what it means to be human. to have physical interaction and experiences where we can see what's taking place in front of us and see how our words and our actions are actually affecting the person who is in front of us. This is human life here. Human life is not the edgy comment on Facebook about whatever political thought you have, or to demean the other side because they don't think like us. It is to befriend, to cherish the image of God in the other person, regardless of how they think. The development of humanity is always going to be divinely connected to our physical presence with one another. And regardless of what social media or texting or email offer us, they do not provide the necessary mediums for you and I to develop understanding and empathy and love and mercy. They may give us pictures every now and then, but the divine experience is missing when we are not physically present to one another. And empathy is one of the greatest tools in fighting selfishness, and humility is one of the greatest weapons for battling the temptation of making a name for yourself. So let me leave you with this. Last week I challenged you to download the app Moment and to also make sure that no devices were brought to any table with which you sit, whether it is the dinner table, whether it is a coffee shop conversation, no matter where it is, when you gather with another person at a table, do not take your device. Here is the next one. And this may kill some of you who have allowed this to become your behavioral center for your family. When your kids get home from school, teenagers, y'all are going to hate me right now, I'm just telling you. It's fine, I quit youth ministry. I'll let Jeff clean up when I'm done. The first hour that you're home from school, no technology. None. Spend the first hour that our kids get home from school, whether you are a teenager, whether you have little kids like I do, spend the first hour that your kids get home from school connecting with them. Giving them a chance to read, heaven forbid. Or play outside in the sun, heaven forbid. You know, build some vitamin D, get it going. Whatever you do, give up technology for 1 hour a day. The email can wait, parents, adults. The text can wait. Spend 1 hour every single day where you put the device off to the side and you say, I'm not touching it. Period. I'm not touching it for 1 hour a day. And oh, by the way, we're building towards something because this is going to get a whole lot harder. So either I'll be the crazy guy when the sermon series is over, and you're just like, yeah, just don't listen to what he says. Or maybe, just maybe, we will have created new demographics in our culture, and we will have created new cultures within our own homes where we are present to one another, and we are giving each other respect and vulnerability as we were created to do so. 1 hour a day, give it up. And be present on top of not bringing you to the tables. Let's pray and we'll have one more song.